Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gilla, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School here at Washington University in St. Louis. We are super excited for today's program and glad to have you with us. Just quick housekeeping for those of you on the Zoom webinar. You probably know this by now, but if I don't remind folks, somebody's going to ask. We cannot see or hear the audience, and we also cannot call on raised hands. I want to also let you know that auto transcription is enabled in case folks need that for hearing or don't want to have the speakers up. But there is a portion of today's program where the spoken portion is in Vietnamese and there's other captioning. At that point, our captioning becomes garbled. We didn't have an easy way around it. I just want to acknowledge that imperfect part of the captioning, but there is always a good caption for the sound going forward. I want to welcome everybody joining us on YouTube and make you aware that we're not able to moderate Q&A through YouTube. So before we get started with today's program, I want to just share what we have coming up next on Open Classroom, a couple programs in the works. We're back on Thursday of this week, that's December the 2nd, a program offered in partnership with the American Academy on Social Work and Social Welfare, confronting the twin pandemics of COVID-19 and opioid addiction. And then 1 week from today, that's December 7th, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Lombe Mwamba from Zambia, who's offering a presentation on sport for development, empowering individuals and communities in Africa. So just two of the literally dozens of things that we have coming up, free and open to all on Open Classroom. We'd love to have you come back to join us for anything that's of interest. But today you're in for a real treat. So much effort has gone into this program as our speaker is going to share inclusion work with us from all over the world. To get the program started, please welcome Associate Professor Jean-Francois Trani, Chair of the Brown School's Public Health Global Health Concentration. Jean-Francois?
Thank you so much, Janet. It's my pleasure to introduce Leia Isanhart today, who is a Senior Technical Advisor, Global Health Advisor, and an advocate for disability inclusion at Catholic Relief Services, a major NGO providing services, development services in over 100 countries of the world, touching the life of 130 million people. So potentially you can imagine the reach of these programs for persons with disabilities is considerable, and having Leia supporting the initiatives of CRS, Catholic Relief Services programs, in their effort to promote inclusion of persons with disabilities in so many countries is really a great endeavor, and certainly not a simple one, as you will see in the videos about 4 countries today. The interesting part, and I really want to insist on that, from our perspective as a university who is trying to improve its own program on inclusion of persons with disabilities, is the collaboration with local actors. This is a work that Leia is leading, that bring together the program, the CRS program, the local organizations that are supporting persons with disabilities and other persons in needs of the relief programs, building capacity of staff, promoting inclusion through awareness and sensitization, including by being with us aware of doing this awareness beyond the programs and the countries where CRS is present. I think we can learn a lot from those examples of countries which are usually largely with less resources than our private universities, and what is being done individually with each family is something we can learn from to promote ourselves more inclusion, more participation of persons with disabilities in our own institution. So without ado, I let Leia Isanhart, so representing the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Jean-Francois. Hello, everyone. My name is Leia Isanhart, and as Jean-Francois said, I'm a Senior Technical Advisor with Catholic Relief Services. I'm based out of our headquarters office in Baltimore, Maryland, and I have the pleasure today of being joined via recording with a couple of my colleagues from Kenya, Guatemala, Madagascar, and Vietnam. So they're all doing fantastic work. That's just a few of the examples of the disability inclusive approach that we are taking to our international development work. And we wanted to make sure that they were able to share with you in their own words today how they do that and why it matters to our work, and to also share with you our thoughts on how these perspectives can be applied within your own day-to-day work. Catholic Relief Services is the overseas arm of the U.S. Catholic Church. We have the mandate of providing aid to the most marginalized and vulnerable people in the world, regardless of race, creed, or nationality. In this past year, in 2020, we were a billion-dollar organization working in more than 80 countries and reaching 159 million participants. We work in partnership with the local Catholic Church. We work with local government and civil society to deliver a wide range of humanitarian and development services, from providing shelter and education to nutrition and health services. Disability inclusion is something that we're incorporating more and more into an increasing number of projects in a wide variety of countries. But before we discuss why we're doing that and how, let's first define what we mean by the term disability. Here we see it as defined in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Persons with disabilities have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments which, in the interaction with various barriers, may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So the thing to point out here is that intersection of how impairment works together with limited activity and restricted participation. It is not just the impairment alone or the problem with your limited bodily function or structure that causes disability. It's that interaction. And when we're working to change those barriers, then we're working toward inclusion. Persons with disabilities make up 15% of the global population. In some places it's higher. A new report released from UNICEF earlier this month revealed that 1 in 10 children worldwide have a disability, a number much, much higher than was previously estimated. 80% of people with disabilities live in low or middle income countries, and 20% of people who live on less than $1.25 a day have a disability. There is a very strong link between disability and poverty, with disability being both a cause and a consequence of poverty. Poor people have a higher risk of becoming disabled, and people with disabilities are amongst the poorest of the poor. As an organization that aims to alleviate poverty, this means that disability touches a large percentage of people that we work with. While CRS has been doing disability inclusive work in the education sector in Southeast Asia since the 1990s and in other places here and there, we've greatly expanded the number of countries and sectors with a disability focus in the past 5 years. Over the next decade, as part of our Agency 2030 strategy, we aim to improve access for persons with disabilities to our services through a rights-based approach. I'd like to note that data is an important element of our new vision, as data helps us not only understand what the participation barriers are, but to also know whether we've actually improved the experience of persons with disabilities in our projects. Now let's have a look at where we're doing this work. The shaded countries on this map are those where CRS is implementing projects with funding that is dedicated to support disability inclusion. These include Ethiopia, Guatemala, Haiti, Iraq, Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, Kenya, Laos, Madagascar, Moldova, Niger, Uganda, Vietnam, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. I think I should also have Nigeria on that list, but the list is ever changing and growing. These projects cover a wide range of technical sectors, from food security and family strengthening, which you'll hear about in a little bit, to inclusive livelihoods and shelter. We make these projects more inclusive by partnering with organizations of people with disability, conducting assessments to understand and address participation barriers, developing new training content with the needs of persons with disabilities in mind, and addressing accessibility. Some activities help people with disabilities gain access to specialized services like rehabilitation, while others are ensuring that people with disabilities can take advantage of services that CRS and our partners are offering to everyone. We are delivering on inclusion by investing in these 3 areas. 1, building staff capacity and investing in champions. We're trying to find those people that are interested in expanding access to services for persons with disabilities and giving them the skills that they need to get that done. 2nd is forming partnerships with organizations of persons with disabilities and disability specialized organizations. And 3rd is making more effort to be accessible, such as meeting accommodation requests during trainings or other events. And you'll hear staff later today share some of those examples. As a note, I wanted to say that for anyone who is visually impaired, we have enabled the accessibility function of this PowerPoint and can make it available to you afterward to support with your screen readers. We'll hear more in a moment from my colleagues about these 3 investments, but before we do that, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that the same investments outlined here are things that you can do in your day-to-day work. Whether you work with a nonprofit, or you're a professor or an administrator, these are things that you can look to in your day-to-day work. Now I have the pleasure of showcasing some of CRS's efforts to include persons with disabilities in our work. I will be sharing pre-recorded remarks from my colleagues in Guatemala, Kenya, Madagascar, and Vietnam. In these brief videos, you're going to hear about why inclusion matters to our work, how we are promoting participation of persons with disabilities, and how partnership can help make inclusion happen. So let's start first with remarks from my colleagues Vero and Daniel in Madagascar. They are working on a USAID-funded resilience and food security project. Now, you might hear some jargon in here, so I wanted to give you the heads up on that. You will hear them refer to the project as the RIFSA, or by the Malagasy name, which is Maharo. Vero and Daniel will share with you the efforts they're making to make their workplace and project activities more inclusive through partnership and staff training. This is one example of where we are working with Humanitarian Inclusion, which is a globally recognized organization with lots of expertise in disability inclusion. They are providing us the technical mentorship that we need to help reach more persons with disabilities through our work. And I'd like to note that we have Madeline Sahagun, who is a senior technical advisor with Humanitarian Inclusion. She'll be with us today, so if you have any specific questions about the partnership or about HI's work, she'll be available during Q&A.
Hi everyone, I am Vera Mananzwan, a gender, youth and social dynamic advisor of CRS Madagascar Reef Says called MAR, implemented in the deep south of Madagascar.
And I am Daniel, a project manager for inclusion at Humanity and Inclusion, an implementation partner in the Reef Say project.
As you see in this picture, CRS Madagascar office is a 4-story building with conference facilities on the top floor, Like most of buildings in Madagascar, it was constructed without an elevator and without sufficient thought given to how persons with physical disabilities could access the higher floors. While hosting in 2019 a workshop, we became aware of how difficult it could be for persons with disabilities to access our conference facilities and contribute to our workshop. This self-awareness prompted a deep reflection on the possibilities and the potential of the organization to become holistically inclusive. Therefore, CRS Madagascar embarked on the joint endeavor with Humanity Inclusion in March 2019 in effort to assess the country program's degree of inclusiveness. That includes its capacity to target staff members and participants, but also level of at which activities and partnerships were actually inclusive. Through this collaboration, field analyses were conducted, and CRS Madagascar program realized that there were a section of the population who weren't always reached by our various interventions. Yet, we believe that inclusion of people with disabilities align with CRS core values. To give you a deep understanding on what has been done overcome with the partnership, I will let my colleague Daniel from Humanity Inclusion to dive deep how partnership can help make inclusion happen.
Thanks, Veru. Humanity and Inclusion is currently part of CRS Resilience in Food Security Assistance RIFSE project design team. Within the RIFSE, we provide technical expertise and advisory work on inclusion to the project staff, the partners, and other stakeholders for everyone to develop a reflex on inclusion, especially that of people with disabilities. The work we do to foster inclusion in the RIFSE, known as Maharu Project, is based on 2 studies on disability and inclusion conducted in the project sites. Moreover, inclusive training curricula, inclusive activities, inclusive coaching were also delivered. Maharu also supported its technical staff in the development of technical studies aiming at considering the inclusion of people with disabilities. Through the restitution of the results of the studies and their collective interpretation, the project seeks to always improve the inclusion of people with disability in its approaches and implementation activities, in order to focus more on their participation and valorization in their community's dynamics, with a hope to ensure their dignity, autonomy, and their access to the services provided in relation to food security, such as health, nutrition, livelihood, inclusive governance, and inclusive natural resources management. A more inclusive programming also led to specific impacts. Customs, social norms, and popular belief leading to the exclusion of people with disability are gradually challenged due to the frequent calls undertaken by the projects. People with disability now dare to participate, express themselves, and take on responsibility, including leadership roles in their respective communities. Monitoring and evaluation system is increasingly becoming inclusive. Disability and inclusion started to be widely considered in data collection, learning, and capitalization process.
CRS Madagascar, along with implementing partners and stakeholders from Madagascar government, at every level gained knowledge and capacity building on inclusive approach. People with disability regain confidence in their potential to become agent of change. For example, a young girl you see in the photo lives in the southern of Madagascar and wants to share her journey living with disabilities while participating in RIFSE's Youth Summit 2021. Thanks to a collective awareness on inclusion, she was able to show her capacity to be a leader, to be valued, and to be listened. There is also another young girl with a disability who became a community volunteers. She widely recognized for her enormous contribution in the development communities. even more than people without disabilities. It's worth mentioning that all of this was possible because project staff and communities become aware of the potential of people with disabilities despite the various challenges and constraints they may face due to a general lack of knowledge of inclusion. Staff members and communities also recognized that through an inclusive approach and inclusive activities, people with disabilities will regain a favorable position that enables them to participate, to express themselves, and to be valued in the decision making within their own households and its community level. There is some resistance, such negligence, a mockery to inclusion due to a lack of awareness of the topic and a reluctance to learn new habits, despite training and awareness raising efforts. Madagascar has signed the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but its reinforcement at the regional level and at the community level is not yet effective, which might jeopardize existing efforts. There should be an inclusive political will from decision makers to support the project and other inclusive initiatives. People with disabilities are still encouraged to regain power and autonomy despite the prevailing education and social norms. There needs to be a shift from the charity model of inclusion to a human rights and dignity based on. Daniel, do you have some recommendation to share with us on inclusion?
Yes. First, there is a need to recognize the importance and benefits of inclusion within each country program. Then, we must team up with disabled people organization and other organizations for people with disability to truly develop the knowledge and capacity to become an inclusive organization. Also, we should dare to recruit and capitalize on the potential of people with disabilities because they can really make a great contribution for the organization itself. And last, it is necessary to create safe spaces for discussion on the theme of inclusion, diversity, and equity in the workplace. That's all for me. Thank you, Vero.
Thanks, Daniel, and thank you for your time. Over.
Thank you to Vera and Daniel for their presentation. They've touched on how they're working at an organizational and community level to promote inclusion through partnership with humanitarian inclusion and local organizations of persons with disabilities. In Kenya, we're taking a very similar approach to improve access to services for children with disabilities via staff training, community dialogue, and government coordination. I invite you to listen now to my colleague Edith Apio with the CRS-led Changing the Way We Care initiative in Kenya. This effort works to help all children live in family-based care instead of institutions. Edith will explain why we pay particular attention to disability in this context and how we do that.
To changing the way we care. Why are we concerned about disability? Disability is a key aspect of our programming because we are looking at inclusion and we are looking at everyone being included. And one of the key drivers of family child separation has been realized as disability as a factor of family child separation. Actually, when we did our situational analysis, we realized that most children with disabilities are actually taken to the institutions because of the many complex issues around disability. And then when you look at those who live, when they leave the institutions, then children with disabilities mostly remain within institutions because not so many families would want to take them up. And also looking at their special needs, mostly sometimes they are left out of services because of stigma, and even the caregivers sometimes are ignorant, not knowing where to get these services from. So as an initiative, we have employed certain strategies to be able to achieve inclusion. And this, we work closely with government the children's department, social services, and also looking at education department, especially on education assessment resource centers. And key to us is the National Council for People with Disabilities that really helps us in terms of programming around disability inclusion. Some of the strategies that we've done together with the Organization of People with Disabilities and also the relevant government department that I've mentioned are community awareness on disability, to be able to dispel the stigma around disability and the myths around disability. And this we have done in several forums through positive parenting, through community dialogues. And then the other strategy is that we have mapped out the stakeholders, disability inclusion stakeholders, and we've held county level stakeholders forum to be able to map out areas of synergy and also to be able to identify services that could be able to support children with disabilities. And we have also developed a stakeholders directory that helps us to do referrals to the caregivers. The other strategies that we have done trainings, both at the staff level and also at the county level, targeting stakeholders. And this was just to help us identify some of the referral mechanisms and also learn around early identification and also just get to know about basics around disability, including etiquette around disability. The other aspect that we are doing is mapping children and families with disabilities, and this has really helped us to be able to provide services to these families and these children. Through the case management approach, we are able to identify priority needs and then link them to the above stakeholders that I talked about, and also support them directly in areas where we can. And part of this, we have used referrals to be able to achieve this service provision to the children with disabilities. And also, we have also been able to do assessments and disability registration. Lastly, I would also want to say that key to us, we've been working with organizations of people with disabilities to be able just to help us understand the real needs to children with disabilities and also understand some of the policy aspects of disability. And also, they have been very critical in terms of sharing their lived experience, which has helped us in programming and also has helped us in terms of knowing how to really do the inclusion.
I'm really really glad to share with you that Edith's team has been doing a fantastic job of exemplifying nothing about us without us, which is a key slogan in disability rights movements. They have really jumped in the deep end head first this past year with making those connections with local organizations of persons with disabilities and having uncomfortable moments and learning from them. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that that team is doing. So Edith shared with us that disability is a major driver of family-child separation. And she talked about how her colleagues are working to improve access to services for children with disabilities and their families through better stakeholder coordination and referrals. Now we're going to hear from the same initiative, Changing Way We Care, in another country, Guatemala, and about how developmental delays and communication impairments in particular are exacerbated when children grow up in institutions instead of in family care. My colleague Lillian Lopez will address the importance of identifying and addressing communication delays in the early years to ease eventual placement into family care. Please note that the video features voiceover translation and that some of the disability terminology is slightly off due to translation from Spanish to English. Also note that we have blurred the faces of the children in the photographs that are featured as a standard protection measure within Changing Way We Care.
Liz.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Lilian.
My name is Lilian Lopez. I am psychologist of Changing the Way We Care. I am also a language therapist, and today we're going to talk about the experience we had in Guatemala in the Zacapa demonstration area. We're going to talk about how this prolonged institutionalization affects the language and knowledge development of children. During the process of case management in the area of demonstration in Zacapa, Guatemala, we were able to identify in 2019 that we had children that in their social and knowledge development were affected. And we were able to see that the children needed help because they presented difficulty in the areas of education learning. When we talk about this, we talk about the early ages of schooling. Children are not prepared either mentally or psychologically or emotionally to go to school. And so we see this disability of not having them prepared for this. We were also able to identify that different children presented different significant problems in their complete development that affected their chronological age. It's very important to go into early stimulation. We also were able to see that residential care is affected in the communication that children have in the verbal area. They need language therapy and also early stimulation to be able to help them. The profile of the children in residential care, we need to prioritize this attention as in sharing the way we care. We saw the need that they have from 0 to 7 years that they are in the institution. They see that their development in learning, there is an underdevelopment, for example, in language, because they are not clear in their speech, in the way they communicate. Children, we can also identify children from 8 years or older that they have a disability in language, and this is a learning problem for these children. And this causes a delay in their knowledge that is not according to their age. When we talk about this underdevelopment, we see that these children in the area where they are growing is not adequate. It has not been according to their age. The stimulation they need is not what is expected. These are children that there are children that also have a discapacity, and besides that, an underdevelopment in language. Maybe they have a small discapacity, but in this residential care is affected much more. The objective of this attention is to facilitate the process of adaptation in a family and community environment. The alternative that we identified for in changing the way we care, we had two stages. The first one was to identify the child, and we were able to see this need to have an evaluation because there was underdevelopment in knowledge and in development. We carried on specific assessments, especially in language, to determine what kind of underdevelopment they had. This helped us to see in what level of language they were, and to be able to work with them different exercises depending on their evaluation. In the second phase, we were able to analyze techniques and tools to work with the main diagnosis. we were able to give training to the staff of Hogar de Primera Infancia in Zacapa to help in the development of the children. In this training, we talked about early stimulation and how to identify an underdevelopment in language. We also gave the staff and caregivers, teachers, to give them materials that they can build to be able to work with the children whom we were able to give a diagnosis and gave them different exercises to help them in that stimulation. Well, we reached the conclusion that when there is a weakness in the diagnosis and in the early stimulation, it gives a major emphasis on negative effects of being in an institution. And we see that it affects the emotional, social, and physical areas of a child or adolescent when they are in an institution. We were also able to see that with a diagnosis that is done on time, that will help us to prevent according to the needs that each child has, to be able to link them to the different services so that the children may develop in a better way in family or their communities. And of course, this reduces a long-term impact if the child continues with a discapacity. So thank you, and that will be all.
Thanks to our colleagues from Guatemala. So we've traveled from Madagascar to Kenya and Guatemala. We will conclude with video compiled by my colleague Nguyen Din with CRS Vietnam. She recently recorded this video of project participants in the Quang Tri and Quang Nam provinces of Vietnam, two areas heavily affected by Agent Orange spraying during the Vietnam War. We have many, many programs going on in that area of the country. With support from Caritas Australia and the local provincial government, CRS is delivering very personalized interventions in homes of children with disabilities, in their schools, and in their communities. You will hear how we work with parents to change their perception of their child, thereby opening up opportunities for the child to access education, play, and work. This last video demonstrates the concept of integral human development, a Catholic teaching that is about promoting the good of every person, treating them as a whole person so they can live authentically and reach their full human potential. That is why this matters to our work at Catholic Relief Services. Just a quick technical note, as Janet mentioned earlier, at the point where you hear Vietnamese, please ignore the Zoom captions if you're using them and read what's on the bottom of the video.
morning, everyone. My name is Nguyệt Ding, and I'm working at CS Vietnam Country Program. I have been with CS Vietnam for more than 20 years, as working as a disability program manager at the moment. And today I'm so happy to share with you a little bit of our experience in promoting the disability inclusion in Vietnam. All these changes have been results of our project support through the capacity building of the parents, of teachers, local government, and other community networks. We emphasize on the coordination of all the stakeholders working together, building their capacity and joining together to find the solution to promote the opportunities in healthcare, social service, and education for children and youth. And you can see in the next video clip how the parents have increased their engagement and how they build on their confidence and how they has changed their attitudes towards the ability, towards the opportunities when they invest their effort and time to support for their children.
Khi mà mẹ mới nhận biết được cái tình trạng bệnh của bé thì lúc đó là mẹ rất là tự kỷ, giống như là mẹ với mẹ và con là đều thu mình lại và không muốn tiếp xúc với thế giới bên ngoài luôn. Vì duyên lúc đó là gặp người lạ nhưng bây giờ là ngất xỉu liền. Mà em mà nói tiếng to hoặc là hét to lên một tiếng là trợn mắt ngất xỉu liền, không có tiếp xúc được với ai hết. Cái khi đó Kỳ Duyên 7 tuổi rồi là mới gặp được chương trình CRS ở sở Bình Quý, là mời đi tham gia một cái buổi hội thảo đầu tiên của chương trình CRS. Lúc đó là có cán bộ CRS đến là cho bé vào dự án, là bắt đầu bé được mẹ đi tập huấn này, bé được đi tập huấn là mới hiểu được cái tình trạng bệnh, bác sĩ mẹ chương trình cho đi học vật lý trị liệu về tự tập tại nhà cho bé này, rồi có giáo viên đến tận nhà để dạy những kiến thức về kỹ năng cơ bản cho bé. Là bé là bắt đầu quen với giáo viên rồi, bắt đầu làm quen với các bạn, rồi bắt đầu bé tự tin rồi mới được tiếp xúc được với mọi người như bây giờ. Có tham gia lớp học cộng đồng rồi gặp cơ gỡ các bạn khuyết tật cùng bị hoàn cảnh giống như bé, là bé là chơi đùa rất là vui vẻ, điều mà không ngờ, gia đình cũng không ngờ luôn á. Có tham gia các sự kiện thể thao đồ của chương trình là bé thì vui chơi rất là vui vẻ, hòa đồng. Bây giờ là bé gặp người lạ rất là tự tin, và thậm chí là rất là thích giao tiếp với mọi người luôn. Mẹ thì rất là vui, rất là hạnh phúc. Không nghĩ là Kỳ Duyên lại may mắn là được tham gia dự án mà đã thay đổi hoàn toàn cuộc đời của mẹ và của bé luôn. Dự án còn lúc đó thì mẹ ở nhà thì không có công việc ổn định mà cũng không có ai chăm bé để đi làm luôn. Thì rất là may mắn là chương trình đã hỗ trợ sinh kế để cho mẹ có động lực để mở quán cà phê và mở quán tạp hóa để buôn bán, thu nhập cũng đủ tròn trải trong ngày.
Trước kia là chưa có dự án thì nói chung là cũng riêng bản thân cũng vậy chứ không phải là tất cả phụ huynh thì cứ nghĩ là con mình nó bị khuyết tật mà nó sẽ không biết gì cả, nó sẽ rụt rà nhút nhát. Nhưng mà từ khi có dự án là cho mẹ có thể nghĩ thoáng hơn, ví dụ biết cũng biết cho con mình làm được cái này cái kia. Thì xa thì có dự án thì cho mẹ ví dụ nhiều cái dạ cộng đồng rồi dạ tại nhà rồi đi phục hồi chức năng thì con thấy là rất là phấn khởi là cho mẹ.
I just love that video. Thank you for letting us share with you today about CRS's approach to disability inclusion. I'd really like to say a special thank you to my colleagues at CRS, Humanity and Inclusion, and our Change the Way We Care partner, Maestro International. The panelists you've heard from today are true champions of disability inclusion, and I'm appreciative of their extensive efforts to help create this presentation for you today. I encourage you to all check out CRS on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever other social media I forgot. On this Friday, December 3rd, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, where we will have much more information about our work and feature stories of individuals like the woman that you see on the slide here. Thanks to you all.
Thank you so much, Leia. We should also introduce your colleagues, Madeline and Roseanne. Or actually, I'll let you introduce yourself maybe and talk about the programs you've been following and promoting for inclusion. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madeline Sahagan, and I'm the Global Food Security Specialist for HI. We also have my colleague here, and I'll let her introduce herself, Dr. Roseanne Rushing, who is the HI's Inclusive Health Policy Lead. And we're both based in Washington, D.C., although Roseanne is fortunately in Lyon, France right now as we speak. So she's enjoying some French food over there. First of all, we just wanted to say thank you to CRS and Leia for organizing this very informative and thought-provoking webinar. And a special thank you to the project participants particularly and the field staff who contributed to this community of learning and for truly being disability inclusion champions, as we call it, from HI. Yeah, and we're here to answer any questions, particularly around the partnership model that we provide and the services that we provide from our technical, our inclusion technical unit globally. And we have technical advisors essentially based all over the world. So yeah, and we're here to talk about the Mahara project as well, if anybody has any questions about that. Roseanne?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. And as Madeline said, I am the Inclusive Health Policy Lead for Humanity and Inclusion. I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to Leia. She has really been a champion, as Madeline said, and really leading the way in disability inclusion. And I am just really grateful for her work and for the work of CRS and this partnership with HI. I really think that that is, you know, paving the path for future projects and for disability inclusion. And my work is more in inclusive health and really how we can, you know, pave that path. And, you know, the three kind of founding principles of inclusive health are meaningful participation, which I think that CRS has done an amazing job in doing and creating that awareness and equality and non-discrimination and accessibility. So those are all things that I think we share in common and I really appreciate.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for joining. We have a few questions in the chat. The first one about the project in Kenya. I read the mention. Edith mentioned mapping families with children with disabilities. How did the program manage to get around the tendency of children with disabilities being concealed by families because of the stigma around disability and the fear of being ostracized?
Thanks for that question. So I will emphasize that we're just at the beginning of this work that's at the family level. So the team in Kenya has been working with those government partners, particularly in Kenya. It's the EARCs. They are Education Assessment Resource Centers, and that is where the government starts the disability identification process. So if a child is identified through that process, then they can be referred to our program, and vice versa. We have social workers and other volunteers in the program who go door to door finding families. And one of the things that's working particularly well is a snowballing approach. So you find one family that has a child with disability, and then you ask them if they know any others in the area. One particular approach that we just trained frontline social workers on was a curricula that comes out of a group called Akiza Ministries in Uganda they have a program called Finding Value, which helps parents do just that. It's a way of having social workers and other frontline workers walk a parent through step by step that process of accepting their child toward becoming an advocate for their child and looking for those resources for them. So those are a couple of the new techniques that we're trying to address that stigma that leads families to hide their children. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Another question is, and it's linked to this first one, right? It's how you manage to bring the interest or to raise the interest of the community members about, all your initiatives, events around inclusion in the different countries.
So it changes from place to place, but I can tell you that I talked just this morning with my colleagues in Zambia who said that this past week they had a community meeting that shared the findings from an assessment that we did earlier in the year. So earlier in the year, we identified that a lot of parents we were working with in this program that's trying to build parenting skills had not adapted any of the program to meet the particular needs of a caregiver of a child with disability. They can struggle with things from how to feed their child in a safe way, how to discipline them in a positive way, how to communicate and play with them in a dignified, respectful, responsive way. So we talked with community members, particularly caregivers of children with disability, and interviewed them to find out what was it that was missing from our program. And we also along the way learned a lot about the stigma and discrimination that they're facing within their communities that either causes them to hide their child, not seek services, or send the child to an institution. So we took those findings and then we held community dialogue sessions to make sure that community leaders, parents, service providers were aware of exactly what these parents were saying their struggles were in their own words, so that we could begin to help people empathize with the situation of these caregivers of children with disability. And that's one of the ways that you can start this dialogue, is by having persons with disabilities or caregivers of these children to share in their own worlds what it's like to walk in their shoes for a day, to begin to build that empathy and connections so that families and service providers will support them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Another question, this time from Janet, actually. How did you start the collaboration between organizations, between CRS and HI, or with local partners? And I'm also particularly interested because I used to work with HI almost 20 years ago, and I know that was something we were trying to push. In my case, in Afghanistan, with mainstream organizations to really support them to be inclusive. And I know it's a difficult endeavor, and you seem to have found this model, and we would like to learn a little more about this collaboration and how you do it.
So I don't know exactly when the two organizations first started working together, but I know that there have been 2 or 3 projects over the past, I'd say, decade, where we work at the country level and there's a particular staff member who recognizes, oh, this is a key part of the population that we've left behind and maybe we shouldn't. And then they reach out and they find HI's technical expertise because they are so well known for their extensive work, not just at looking at disability, but doing it with what we call an intersectional lens. So looking at that intersection of age, gender, and disability. So I know that happened in Ethiopia. It's happened in Vietnam over the past decade. But Roseanne, I would say that our work with these particular folks and another one of our colleagues, Alessandra Aresu, who's their global health director, really came out of a global health networking and advocacy group that we're all part of. And we began to work with each other through that and saw the synergies and built our relationships. And it was truly the person-to-person connection that then sparked this, oh, we could be doing this on a bigger level. And quite organic from there. But I think oftentimes it's about one particular person starting to champion the issue, and and giving that individual the knowledge and the confidence and the bandwidth that they need to then go out and pursue that partnership. But they really do need support of leadership in order to do that. And I can't say thanks enough to CRS, how all the way up to our CEO, Sean Callahan, I've had the support to pursue these partnerships, whether it's with HI or with Special Olympics International or CBM. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I don't know if HI wants to add something about it, because you might have several partners where you pursue different approaches, or... Thanks so much.
I will just add something that I have found. I mean, we are extremely grateful to CRS for reaching out and for developing that partnership and starting that network. And what I have found is that organizations are increasingly becoming more aware of the need to have inclusive health or inclusion, disability inclusion in their programs. However, they don't know how. And so that's kind of where the gap in knowledge is. There's the awareness, there's the willingness, and then there's the kind of technical knowledge of how do we start doing that. And I think that's where it helps to have these kind of partnerships with organizations that have a track record and the technical expertise and the know-how to get organizations from the awareness, willingness to the implementation of appropriate and successful and sustainable programs in the field, and working with organizations for persons with disabilities to make sure there's a sustainability effort.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
and just to add there, we have a whole unit that basically focuses on just inclusive practices. And we've worked with companies and organizations like CRS and governments as well. And so in these three pillars, three approaches that we have in these different three pillars, that's how we basically try to integrate some of these practices. And we have, it was a huge investment for HI. It is their mandate, but they've taken on a lot of, we have specialists in every sector now: inclusive WASH, inclusive health, inclusive food security. And and it's been really this collaborative effort to reinforce inclusive practices with organizations. And we can also send more information about that and how to collaborate with us.
Definitely, we will be interested. Thank you. Thank you so much, Madeleine. Maybe a few, we have at the time already, a few last closing thoughts. For us, eventually, as a university, what we should be doing or what we could be doing?
Yeah, I wanted to leave you all with, the challenge to think about, what are you going to do differently tomorrow to fight exclusion and promote inclusion? Like, what are you going to do differently with your money, your friendships, your leaders, your neighbors, your school, your workplace? What's like one thing that you can do differently to figure out what some of those barriers are in your own community and knock them down?
Thanks, Leia. Madeleine, Rosanne?
I have a similar thought process to Leia. It's just, for me, it's taking it from that awareness, I think, that we have created, and making concrete actions, rather than just keeping it in our mind, like, I should do something, we can do something. What are the concrete actions or the next actions that you could take as an individual, as you could take at a policy level for, talking with your local politicians or advocating at a more global level? It's all of our responsibilities, and we can't just leave that to someone else.
Thanks. Madeline?
I take away that how partnerships really help, and you can't do it alone, essentially. And I think the way forward is having this integrated approach and this partnership approach with different organizations and universities. And this is a way for us to really convey this message that this matters. Inclusion should be at the forefront in a policy level and in programs, etc. So thank you to CRS for really reaching out to us and cultivating that relationship with us.
Thank you all so much for a great presentation, a great dialogue. It's time for those who are from the Brown School. We meet tomorrow at 12 to discuss how we can do better for inclusion very concretely in our school. Thank you, Janet, for organizing this amazing series. I don't know if you want to close the meeting, and see you all next month for this special open class.
Thank you so much, and to our audience, what a wonderful program. Really salute the work that's being done and just appreciate you all bringing this wisdom and this inspiration to us. Hope to see everybody again soon. We'll have another Inclusive Perspective Series program in December, so please do come back and join us. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye now.